afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another exciting episode of PropagandaFields from the Hershey Dane. Off here to have a look at another map. In this case, we're having a look here at Semoisky Winter. And as some of you might have deduced, this is the winter variant of Semoisky. And you might ask yourself, well, what's the big deal? It's more or less the same map. Well, more or less, but there are still some vital differences. For example, winter has a slight tendency of causing water to freeze, and that overall, for example, creates some large differences, whereas previously these areas basically served as bottlenecks. Well, the ice kinda says, you know, to hell with that. Overall, meaning this is a map where there's a lot more tactical maneuverability, but there's a lot more paths for harassment and causing trouble. For example, at this point, initially a bit safer, you know, can I, for example, be struck from here, rather than, for example, usually you could say, oh, well, I'll just go through here, set up some defenses here, you know, all dandy. Instead, now you have to sort of worry about here, so that opens up for more paths. Same here, now, you could usually sort of bottle up here, but now you can just walk over here, here, or there. It overall means you have to sort of be a lot more aware of things, and of course have to sort of try and avoid sort of the thoughts you'd normally have on a map like Semoisky. So in that regard, it is a bit more tricky when it comes to defending. On the other hand, of course, when it comes to offensives, it does provide a few more options. In terms of deep snow, which of course is a sort of a winter map hazard, there's not really sort of much in sort of the worst places. There's a bit here around this building, which rather makes it a bit tricky sort of to utilize, in particular for the southern player, but overall it's not something that necessarily makes a huge difference. Beyond that, I mean, it's more or less the same buildings. Usually there can be between winter and summer be some change. For example, with this building, for example, the buildings are a bit sort of rotated differently with the windows, for example. And there might be some changes up here. For example, there's a larger house here, and I think it's more or less the same here. For example, there's a bigger building where on the summer map, for example, it's a small shed. Very small. Petite, even. One of the bigger differences actually comes in resources, and that's really where Semoisky Winter becomes a bit tricky, and where I'm personally not a huge fan of it. Basically, you have the fuel points much further in, and the tricky part here is basically, one here is sort of alright, there's a bit of cover, there's a building, but not far away, and overall sort of nice open, so it's a bit alright to defend. But again, you know, if you're sort of trying to fight here from the north, it can be a bit tricky. Again, you can sort of risk being harassed up there, so in that regard, you're setting up position sort of with all this. It's not quite as straightforward as you'd like it to be. This one, on the other hand, has the slightly nasty thing here. There's basically a building right next to it, which basically means, in particular, if it's a southern player who rushes forward, you can basically hold back your opponent. Compared to the south, there's only 2 windows here. There's 3 windows here. So in that regard, and it's particularly annoying for the Wehrmacht. It's a Wehrmacht player that is sort of to reach it. You know, you can usually do a lot to sort of hold up your opponent there. So in that regard, this is a bit more tricky. There's a lot of rushing. It usually tends to involve towards this, and certainly holding this point can be a bit tricky. Then again, if you sort of have it and you got sort of well positioned, you might be able to hold it with an MG, for example. Though you might still consider some barbed wire around here and here to make it a bit harder to sort of make a direct rush at. Otherwise, you know, a quick Molotov or grenade or something like that might push you out of it. So in that regard, that's the basically bigger differences here. Again, here it's a lot harder to sort of basically lock down with the building, but here it's pretty damn easy. So in that regard, it is a bit tricky there. Sort of that, and again, you can try and make for it, but again, you can sort of risk, in particular if you're the Axis, that it's already been occupied, and you're going to have a bit of a hard time. So that's a bit vital there to keep in mind. But otherwise, not the sort of some Semoisky stuff there applies. Been building some more or less besides those few there the same. Sort of terrain-wise, again, there's some sneaky paths here, for example. Again, a nice little trick there. Mines around here for to be effective. Mines here, pretty much always something you have to watch out for. Mines here and here as well. Always something to keep in mind of. Of course, the same here and around here. All good spots for mines. If you're going, of course, for infiltration, this is also a good map. There's sort of buildings everywhere where you can appear from, for example, and cause havoc and other nasty bits. So in that regard, you know, that's also something to keep in mind. Partisans, encirclement, Luftwaffe ground forces, and so on are useful on these maps, as they do allow you several points of entry with such units. This end, of course, will always be a bit sort of tricky to hold. Of course, even further here, for example, guiding from the north, since there's also possibilities of river crossing from the north, it can be a bit tricky. On the other hand, of course, does mean it's a bit more difficult to bottleneck a player around here compared to the regular Semoisky, where this is a pretty nasty bottleneck. Now, of course, still in terms of territory, it is a bit more, but you usually have a bit more options sort of clearing things out here if you really want to try it. barbed wire, of course, in that regard can also be helpful, you know, making it a bit more difficult, for example, for your opponent to cross in if you feel like that. Otherwise, the cemetery is, well, basically still the cemetery. We'll usually see a bit of action. But otherwise, I mean, you know, flank action here is not too uncommon. It's also not uncommon, for example, seeing the northern player cross here to sort of try and go for this. So maybe, you know, you could consider some barbed wire something up. It's definitely something to be aware of. There's usually, again, some direct movement towards these 2 points. Similarly here, not so much really, actually. I mean, again, it's sort of a bit further removed and the path isn't quite as straightforward. So you have less to worry about, for example, from that direction if you're sort of, you know, again, a northern player that's holding this compared to a southern player who's holding this. So there are some slight sort of minutiae there you sort of have to keep in mind. But beyond this is more or less Semoisky, so I don't think I'll be going through all that. I mean, for all the sort of deeper details, you know, check out the Semoisky propaganda fields for that. This is just sort of more of an update on the winter variants map here, and again sort of pointing out the big deals, which again are the ice here, again really pretty much removes most of the bottlenecks here, and of course the difference in fuel points here, which do have some more trickiness in sort of holding and defending, but also attacking. So thank you all for watching, hope you learned something, hope you enjoyed, and see you all another time. This is Imperial Dane saying cheers and bye.